The dirt beneath Zara Vaughn's knees had grown warm with the afternoon sun, and she could feel each grain pressing through the worn fabric of her mourning dress as she knelt beside the freshly turned earth that held her younger brother. The cemetery on the outskirts of Tucson, Arizona, stretched out in dusty rows, marked by simple wooden crosses and occasional stone markers that the wealthier families could afford. It was September 1882, and the heat still clung to the desert landscape despite the approaching autumn. Zara's hands trembled as she placed a handful of wildflowers she had picked along the road on the grave, their petals already wilting in the harsh climate. Her brother Thomas had been only 19 when the fever took him, burning through his body in just 4 days, while she sat helplessly beside his bed in their rented room above the general store. She had sung to him, bathed his forehead with cool water, and prayed until her voice grew hoarse, but nothing had stopped death from claiming him. The funeral had been that morning, and it had been proper. The pine coffin had been sturdy and well made, not the rough boxes they sometimes used for those who could not afford better. Reverend Matthews had spoken kind words over Thomas, and there had even been flowers at the church. The undertaker, Mr. Simmons, had been respectful and gentle as he prepared Thomas's body, dressing him in clean clothes that Zara had pressed with shaking hands. The grave had been dug deep and true, and the marker that would be placed there in a few days would bear Thomas's full name and dates carved into decent wood. All of this had cost money that Zara did not have, money she had scraped together through a trade that still made her left hand feel unnaturally light. She glanced down at her bare ring finger, seeing the faint line where the simple gold band had rested for the past 3 years. It had been her mother's ring, passed down on her deathbed 5 years ago when Zara had been just 18 and Thomas only 14. Their father had died in a mining accident 2 years before that, and the ring had been the only thing of value their mother had possessed. Zara had worn it every day since, feeling its weight as a connection to the woman who had raised her with love despite their poverty. When Thomas had fallen ill, Zara had used every cent of their savings on medicine and the doctor's visits. When he died anyway, she had nothing left for a burial. The thought of Thomas being placed in a pauper's grave, dumped into a common pit, with others who had no one to speak for them, had been unbearable. So she had taken the ring to Mr. Simmons and asked what she could arrange. The undertaker had been a weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that suggested he had seen too much grief to add to anyone's burden unnecessarily. He had taken the ring, examined it carefully in the light from his window, and nodded slowly. "This will cover everything your brother deserves," he had said quietly. "A proper coffin, preparation, the gravesite, and a marker. I will make certain he is treated with dignity." Zara had thanked him through her tears and walked out of his establishment with empty hands but a grateful heart. Thomas would rest properly, and that was what mattered. The ring was just an object, she had told herself. Thomas had been her living, breathing brother, and he deserved every bit of respect she could provide him in death. Now, kneeling in the cemetery with the sun beating down on her dark hair, Zara wondered what she would do next. She had no family left, no husband despite the assumption her ring had provided, and her job serving tables at the Silver Spur Saloon barely paid enough for her room and meals. Tucson was growing, transforming from a rough frontier town into something more substantial, but opportunities for a young woman alone were limited and often dangerous. She had protected herself these past years by claiming to be a widow, letting people assume her husband had died and left her the ring. It had kept the rougher men at bay and given her a respectability that allowed her to work without constant harassment. Now, without the ring, she would have to be more careful, more watchful. "Miss, are you all right?" The voice came from behind her, deep and concerned, carrying the slight drawl of someone who had spent years in the saddle under open skies. Zara turned quickly, startled from her thoughts, and found herself looking up at a tall man silhouetted against the bright sky. He removed his hat immediately, revealing dark hair that needed cutting, and a face weathered by sun and wind, but undeniably handsome in a rugged way. His eyes were a striking gray blue, like storm clouds over the desert, and they held genuine concern as he looked down at her. "I am fine, thank you," Zara said automatically, starting to rise. The man stepped forward quickly, offering his hand to help her up. She hesitated only a moment before accepting, feeling the callous strength of his palm as he pulled her effortlessly to her feet. He released her hand immediately, stepping back to a respectful distance. "I did not mean to intrude on your grief," he said, his voice softer now. "I saw you from over yonder and worried you might be unwell in this heat. It is not safe to be out here alone too long without water." He gestured to the canteen hanging from his belt. "Would you like some?" Zara realized her throat was indeed parched, and she nodded gratefully. The stranger uncapped his canteen and handed it to her. She drank carefully, the water warm but welcome, and handed it back with a murmur of thanks. Up close, she could see he was probably in his late 20s, with the lean, muscular build of a working cowboy. His clothes were dusty from travel, but well maintained, and the gun belt at his hip was worn with the ease of someone who knew how to use it, but did not seek trouble. "I am Harrison Reeves," he said, extending his hand again for a proper introduction. "I just hired on at the Triple Bar Ranch outside town. I am sorry for your loss." His eyes flicked to the fresh grave, then back to her face with honest sympathy. "Zara Vaughn," she replied, shaking his hand briefly. "My brother, Thomas. The fever took him 4 days ago." Her voice caught slightly on the words, and she looked away, not wanting this stranger to see fresh tears. Harrison nodded solemnly. "Fever is a cruel thing. I lost my younger sister to it when I was 20. Sarah was just 16. He said it simply, without elaboration, but Zara heard the old pain beneath the words and felt an unexpected kinship with this man she had just met. He understood the particular anguish of losing a sibling, of being left behind when someone young and full of promise was stolen away too soon. "I should go," Zara said, gathering her composure. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Reeves. It was more than necessary, and I appreciate it." She moved a step past him, but Harrison shifted slightly, not blocking her path, but clearly wanting to say something more. "It is a long walk back to town in this heat," he said carefully. "My horse is just over there, and I would be happy to give you a ride if you would allow it. I know you do not know me, but I give you my word as a gentleman that you would be safe." His gray-blue eyes met hers steadily, open and honest, waiting for her decision without pressure. Zara considered. It was indeed a long walk, nearly 2 miles back to the center of Tucson, and the sun was merciless. She was exhausted from grief and lack of sleep, and the thought of trudging through the dust was almost overwhelming. She studied Harrison's face, looking for any sign of dishonesty or ill intent, and found none. There was something solid about him, something trustworthy in the way he held himself, and spoke to her with respect. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you. I accept your offer." Relief flickered across Harrison's face, though whether it was because she had agreed or because she would not have to walk in the heat was unclear. He gestured toward a sturdy chestnut gelding tied to a mesquite tree at the edge of the cemetery, and they walked together in silence for a moment. "Did you know my brother?" Zara asked suddenly, curious about why Harrison had been at the cemetery at all. "Were you at the service this morning?" Harrison shook his head as they reached his horse. "No, I only arrived in Tucson yesterday evening. I was paying respects to my own dead. My mother is buried here. She passed 2 years ago, and I was working a ranch in New Mexico at the time. Could not get here in time for the funeral." He ran a hand along his horse's neck absently. "I try to visit when I pass through." "I am sorry," Zara said softly, understanding now. They were both orphans then, both alone in the world, with only memories of family. Harrison untied his horse and swung up into the saddle with practiced ease, then reached down to help Zara up behind him. She settled herself carefully, unsure where to hold on, until the horse shifted and she instinctively grabbed Harrison's waist to keep from sliding off. She felt him tense for just a moment, then relax. "Hold on tight," he said over his shoulder. "Duke here has a smooth gait, but better safe than sorry." He clicked his tongue, and the horse started forward at an easy walk, carrying them away from the cemetery and toward the dusty road that led back to town. The rhythm of the horse's movement was soothing, and Zara found herself relaxing slightly despite her grief. Harrison did not try to make conversation, seeming to understand that she needed quiet, and for that she was grateful. As they rode, Zara studied the back of Harrison's head, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the straight line of his shoulders. There was something calming about his presence, something that made her feel less alone than she had in days. She wondered about him, about where he had come from, and what had brought him to Tucson. Cowboys drifted from ranch to ranch, following work and weather, rarely putting down roots. He would probably be gone in a few months, moving on to the next job, the next town. It was the nature of their lives, The outskirts of Tucson began to appear around them, scattered buildings giving way to more concentrated settlement as they approached the center of town. The streets were busy with afternoon activity, wagons rolling past, horses tied at hitching posts, and people going about their business. Harrison guided Duke carefully through the traffic, mindful of his passenger. "Where can I take you, Miss Vaughn?" he asked, turning his head slightly to be heard over the noise of the street. "Your home or place of work?" "The Silver Spur Saloon," Zara said, then added quickly, "I work there as a waitress. My room is above the establishment." She felt the need to clarify, not wanting him to get the wrong impression. Harrison simply nodded, guiding Duke toward the saloon without comment or judgment. When they arrived, he dismounted and helped Zara down, his hands respectful on her waist as he steadied her descent. "Thank you again, Mr. Reeves," Zara said, looking up at him. "Your kindness today meant more than you know." Harrison smiled, a slow, warm expression that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "It was my pleasure, Miss Vaughn. I hope things get easier for you." He hesitated, then added, "If you ever need anything, help of any kind, you can find me at the Triple Bar. I mean that sincerely." He held her gaze for a moment, making sure she understood he was serious, then tipped his hat, mounted Duke, and rode away down the street. Zara watched him go, feeling strangely reluctant to see him leave, then turned and went into the saloon through the side door that led to the stairs. Her room was small and hot, the single window providing little relief from the afternoon heat. Zara sank onto her narrow bed, suddenly overcome with exhaustion. The events of the past week crashed over her, the terror of watching Thomas sicken, the helplessness of being unable to save him, the wrenching grief of his death, and the bitter practicality of arranging his funeral. She had held herself together through all of it, but now, alone in her stifling room, she allowed herself to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs shook her body as she mourned not just Thomas, but everything she had lost over the years. Her parents, her childhood, the dreams she had once had of a different life, the ring her mother had given her, sold for the price of dignity and death. Eventually the tears subsided, leaving her hollow and aching. Zara washed her face in the basin on her dresser, changed out of her morning dress into her work clothes, and prepared to go downstairs for the evening shift. Life did not stop for grief, and she needed the money now more than ever. As she pinned up her hair and smoothed her skirt, she caught herself thinking about Harrison Reeves, about his kind eyes and gentle manner. She pushed the thoughts away firmly. She could not afford distractions or foolish hopes. He was just a kind stranger who had helped her in a moment of need. Nothing more. But over the next 2 weeks, as Zara worked her shifts at the Silver Spur, she found herself thinking about Harrison more often than she wanted to admit. She wondered if he had settled in at the Triple Bar, if he was making friends among the other ranch hands, if he ever thought about the grieving woman he had met at the cemetery. She told herself it was ridiculous to dwell on a man she had met for less than an hour, but her traitorous heart paid no attention to logic. Then, on a Friday evening when the saloon was crowded and noisy with cowboys spending their weekly pay, Zara looked up from delivering drinks to a table and saw Harrison standing near the door, his eyes scanning the room. When his gaze found her, his face lit up with that same warm smile she remembered, and he made his way through the crowd toward her. Zara's heart did something complicated in her chest, and she had to remind herself to breathe normally. "Miss Vaughn," Harrison said when he reached her, having to speak up to be heard over the piano and laughter. "I was hoping I might see you here." He looked uncertain, almost shy, quite different from the confident cowboy who had ridden up to her in the cemetery. "Mr. Reeves," Zara replied, pleased and flustered in equal measure. "What brings you to town?" She knew perfectly well what brought cowboys to town on Friday nights, but she wanted to hear him say it, wanted to know if he had come specifically seeking her out, or if seeing her was just a happy coincidence for him. "I was hoping to buy you supper," Harrison said directly, his eyes steady on hers. "If you are willing, and your employer would give you time away." "I have been thinking about you these past 2 weeks, wondering how you were managing." His honesty was disarming, and Zara felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I do not finish my shift until 9, she said regretfully, glancing at the clock on the wall that showed it was barely 7. Harrison's face fell slightly, but then he brightened. "I can wait. Would you allow me to sit somewhere out of the way until you are finished? I promise not to be a nuisance." The eagerness in his voice, the obvious desire to spend time with her, made Zara's decision easy. "There is a table in the corner by the window," she said, pointing it out. "If you sit there and order something to eat, I can check on you during my rounds, and when I finish, we can have supper together, if you do not mind waiting that long." Harrison's smile was all the answer she needed. He touched his hat brim in acknowledgement and made his way to the corner table, settling in with his back to the wall in the habit of men who had learned to be watchful. The next 2 hours passed more quickly than usual for Zara, knowing Harrison was there watching her work. She was acutely aware of his presence, catching his eye occasionally across the crowded room and seeing the warm approval in his gaze. He nursed a beer and ate a steak dinner, slowly, clearly making it last, and, true to his word, he caused no trouble and bothered no one. When 9 o'clock finally came and the night shift waitress arrived to take over, Zara removed her apron, tidied her hair, and went to Harrison's table. He stood immediately, pulling out a chair for her, with old-fashioned courtesy that made her smile. "Are you hungry?" he asked as she sat down. "I know you have been on your feet for hours." Zara nodded, realizing she was indeed hungry, having eaten only a piece of bread at midday. Harrison signaled to the other waitress and ordered soup, bread, and coffee for both of them, then turned his full attention to Zara. "How have you been? Truly?" The question, asked with such genuine concern, nearly undid her composure. Zara blinked back sudden tears and took a steadying breath before answering. "It has been difficult," she admitted quietly. "The grief comes in waves. Some moments I am fine, functioning normally, and then something will remind me of Thomas, and it is as though he just died all over again." She twisted her bare hands in her lap, still unused to the absence of the ring. Harrison reached across the table and covered her hands with one of his own, the gesture gentle and comforting rather than presumptuous. "That is the nature of grief," he said softly. "It does not follow a straight path. Some days are bearable and some are nearly impossible, but slowly, over time, the impossible days become fewer." He squeezed her hands gently, then withdrew, giving her space. "Have you been managing otherwise, financially and such?" Zara hesitated, not wanting to admit her precarious situation to this man, who was still essentially a stranger, despite the connection she felt with him. But there was something about Harrison that invited honesty, something about the way he looked at her that made her feel safe to be vulnerable. "I am managing," she said carefully. "It is tight, but I am working as many shifts as I can get." Their food arrived then, providing a natural break in the conversation. As they ate, Harrison told her about his work at the Triple Bar, describing the vast ranch lands, the cattle drives, and the crew of men he worked alongside. He had a gift for storytelling, painting pictures with his words that made Zara feel as though she could see the landscape he described. In turn, she told him more about Thomas, about their childhood in a small mining town in Colorado before their father died, about their mother's strength in holding the family together until illness took her too. "When Mother died, I promised her I would take care of Thomas," Zara said, her voice catching. "I tried so hard, but I could not save him from the fever. I could not keep my promise." The guilt she had been carrying poured out with the words, the burden of perceived failure that had been weighing on her since Thomas's death. Harrison leaned forward, his eyes intense and serious. "Zara," he said, using her first name for the first time, "you did everything humanly possible. Fever is not something you can fight with determination or love, as much as we wish it were. You kept your promise by being there with him, by making sure he was not alone, by giving him a proper burial when he passed. Your mother would be proud of you, not disappointed. I am certain of that." The conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty with which he spoke, broke through Zara's guilt in a way nothing else had. She felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were cleaner somehow, less bitter than the tears she had cried alone in her room. Harrison handed her his handkerchief without comment, waiting patiently while she composed herself. "I am sorry," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "I did not mean to fall apart in the middle of the saloon." Harrison shook his head, dismissing her apology. "Grief needs to come out. Better here with a friend than alone." The word friend warmed Zara, though part of her registered disappointment that he saw their connection only in those terms. But friendship was valuable too, especially for someone as alone as she was. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between them, touching on everything from books they had read to places they dreamed of seeing someday. Zara learned that Harrison was 27, originally from Kansas, and had been working ranches since he was 15. He had a younger brother somewhere in California who he had lost touch with years ago, and he spoke of someday finding him again with a wistfulness that tugged at Zara's heart. She told him she was 23 and had been in Tucson for 2 years, having drifted south after their mother died, in search of work and better weather for Thomas's weak lungs. The irony that Thomas had died of fever rather than the lung troubles they had feared was not lost on either of them. Finally, when the saloon began to empty and the hour grew late, Harrison walked Zara to the stairs leading to her room. At the bottom step, he paused, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read in the dim lamplight. "May I call on you again?" he asked formally. "Perhaps take you to dinner on a day you have free, somewhere nicer than this saloon." There was vulnerability in the question, a fear of rejection that surprised Zara, given his confident demeanor. She realized he was as uncertain of this connection as she was, as afraid of reading too much into what might be simple kindness. "I would like that very much," Zara said softly, rewarded by the relief and pleasure that flooded Harrison's face. "I have Sunday afternoons free. The saloon does a light service then and does not need me." "Sunday then," Harrison agreed. "I will come by at 1 o'clock if that suits you." Zara nodded, and they stood there for a moment longer, neither quite ready to part. Finally, Harrison stepped back, tipped his hat, and said, "Good night, Zara. Sleep well." His use of her first name felt intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Good night, Harrison," she replied, and was rewarded with another of his transformative smiles before he turned and left the saloon. Zara climbed the stairs to her room, feeling lighter than she had in weeks, a small seed of hope taking root in her heart, despite her best efforts to remain practical and guarded. Sunday came with agonizing slowness. Zara worked her Saturday shift in a daze of anticipation, trying not to think about Harrison and failing completely. She washed and pressed her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and spent Saturday evening mending a loose button and refreshing the lace at the collar. She had so few nice things, having sold most of what she owned over the years to keep herself and Thomas fed and housed, and she wanted to look her best. When Sunday afternoon finally arrived, Zara was dressed and waiting 15 minutes early, too nervous to sit still. She stood by her window, watching the street below, and felt her heart leap when she saw Harrison riding toward the saloon on Duke, looking handsome in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. She grabbed her shawl and hurried downstairs, not wanting to make him come inside, and emerged onto the boardwalk just as he was dismounting. Harrison's face when he saw her was everything Zara could have hoped for. His eyes widened appreciatively, and he smiled that warm smile that made her feel beautiful, despite her faded dress and worn shoes. "You look lovely," he said simply, offering his arm. "Are you ready?" "Where are we going?" Zara asked as he helped her mount Duke, then swung up behind her this time, so she could ride more comfortably in front. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and Zara was intensely aware of his closeness, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the woodsy scent of soap and leather that clung to him. "There is a restaurant on the south side of town, near the Mission," Harrison said, his voice close to her ear. "A Mexican woman runs it, and she makes the best food I have tasted since leaving my grandmother's kitchen in Kansas. I thought you might enjoy it." The fact that he had put thought into where to take her, that he had chosen somewhere special rather than just convenient, touched Zara deeply. The restaurant was small and clean, with only 6 tables covered in bright woven cloths. The proprietress, a woman in her 50s with a kind face and sharp eyes, greeted Harrison warmly in Spanish before switching to accented English when she saw Zara. "This is your young lady?" she asked Harrison with a knowing smile. "She's very pretty. You sit. I will bring you my best dishes." Before either of them could respond, she was bustling away to her kitchen, leaving them to settle at a table by the window. "I hope you do not mind that she assumed we were courting," Harrison said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Senora Martinez is a romantic. She sees hearts and flowers everywhere." But there was a question in his eyes as he looked at Zara, a hope that maybe Senora Martinez was not entirely wrong. "I do not mind," Zara said softly, feeling bold. "Are we courting, Harrison?" She wanted to know where she stood, what this was between them. She had been alone too long and hurt too often to play games or pretend indifference she did not feel. Harrison reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "I would like to be," he said honestly. "From the moment I saw you in that cemetery, Something in me recognized you. I know that sounds foolish, but it is the truth. These past 2 weeks, you have been in my thoughts constantly. I want to know you, Zara. I want to see where this connection between us might lead." His gray-blue eyes held hers steadily, open and honest, laying his heart bare in a way that took courage. Then Zara felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were different from the tears of grief she had cried so many of lately. These were tears of hope, of something fragile and new, taking root in the ruins of her recent losses. "I would like that too," she whispered. "I have felt the same way, but I was afraid to hope. Everything I have loved has been taken from me, and I am frightened of caring for someone again, only to lose them too." Harrison squeezed her hand gently. "I cannot promise that life will not bring pain," he said quietly. "None of us knows what tomorrow holds, but I can promise that I will be honest with you, that I will treat you with respect and care, and that I will not walk away at the first sign of difficulty. I am a man who keeps his commitments, Zara. If you give me your heart, I will guard it as the treasure it is." Before Zara could respond, Señora Martinez returned with plates piled high with enchiladas, rice, beans, and fresh tortillas. The aromas were incredible, rich with spices and herbs, and despite the emotional intensity of the moment, Zara's stomach growled audibly. Harrison laughed, breaking the tension, and they fell to eating with genuine appetite. The food was as good as Harrison had promised, each bite a revelation of flavor that made Zara close her eyes in appreciation. As they ate, the conversation turned to lighter topics. Harrison told funny stories about his fellow ranch hands, including one about a greenhorn from Boston who had tried to impress everyone by riding a notoriously ornery horse and ended up hanging from a tree branch while the horse calmly grazed beneath him. Zara laughed until her sides hurt, the sound feeling strange and wonderful after weeks of grief. She found herself relaxing in a way she had not thought possible. The easy companionship between them as nourishing as the food they shared. After dinner, Harrison suggested a walk through the mission gardens nearby, and Zara agreed readily. The old Spanish mission of San Xavier del Bac stood gleaming white in the afternoon sun, its domes and towers rising majestically against the blue sky. The gardens around it were carefully tended by the priests, a green oasis in the desert landscape, and visitors were welcome to walk the paths during the day. They strolled slowly along the gravel paths, surrounded by flowering plants and the gentle sound of water from irrigation channels. Harrison offered his arm, and Zara took it, enjoying the simple pleasure of walking beside him in this peaceful place. They talked about their childhoods, about the families they had lost, about their hopes for the future. Harrison spoke of wanting to have his own ranch someday, a small spread where he could raise horses and build something lasting. Zara admitted that she had always dreamed of having a home again, a real home with roots and stability, not just rented rooms above saloons. "What would you do if you had that home?" Harrison asked, genuinely curious. "What does your perfect life look like?" Zara thought carefully before answering, painting a picture with words the way he had done when describing the ranch. She spoke of a small house with a garden where she could grow vegetables and flowers, chickens in a coop, maybe a milk cow. She wanted to bake bread in her own kitchen and hang laundry on a line in her own yard. She wanted to wake up in the same bed every morning knowing it was hers, that no one could take it away or raise the rent beyond her means. And she wanted children eventually, a family to replace the one she had lost, though she felt shy admitting this last part to Harrison. "That sounds like a fine dream," Harrison said softly. "A good life worth working toward." There was something in his tone that made Zara glance at him, and she saw him looking at her with such warmth and longing that her breath caught. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully, and took both her hands in his. "Zara, I know we have only just met, and I know this is fast, but I feel something with you that I have never felt before. I want to be part of making your dreams come true. I want to build that life with you, if you will have me." Zara's heart pounded so hard, she thought Harrison must be able to hear it. Part of her wanted to throw caution to the wind and say yes immediately, but another part, the part that had been hurt and disappointed too often, held back. "Harrison, you barely know me," she said carefully. "How can you be sure of what you feel?" "Because I recognize you," Harrison said simply, "soul deep, in a way that has nothing to do with time and everything to do with truth. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Zara. I am just asking for the chance to court you properly, to prove to you that what I feel is real and lasting. Will you give me that chance?" Looking into his earnest face, seeing the vulnerability and hope in his eyes, Zara knew her answer. She had been alone and afraid for so long, holding herself apart to avoid more pain. But Harrison was offering her something precious, a chance at happiness, at building the life she dreamed of with someone who seemed to understand her deepest heart. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will give you that chance." Harrison's whoop of joy startled birds from nearby trees, and then he was spinning her around, laughing with pure delight. When he set her down, both of them were breathless and grinning like children. He cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones, and Zara thought he might kiss her. But instead, he pressed his lips softly to her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her eyes well with tears. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "I promise you will not regret this." They walked back through the gardens hand in hand, talking and laughing, making plans for when they could see each other again. Harrison had to work most days, but he could come to town on Saturday evenings and Sunday afternoons. Zara's schedule at the saloon was flexible enough that she could arrange her hours to accommodate him. They agreed to see each other at least twice a week, more if possible. Over the following weeks, Harrison was true to his word. He courted Zara with an old-fashioned devotion that was both touching and thrilling. He appeared faithfully every Saturday evening and Sunday afternoon, finding new ways to spend time with her. They walked through town, explored the desert trails on Duke, attended church services together, and spent hours talking about everything and nothing. Harrison brought her small gifts, wildflowers he picked on the range, a pretty stone he found in a creek bed, a ribbon for her hair that matched her eyes. None of it was expensive, but each gift was chosen with care and given with love that showed in his eyes. For her part, Zara found herself falling deeper in love with Harrison with each passing day. His steady presence in her life became something she relied on, a source of comfort and joy that helped her heal from the losses she had endured. She loved his kindness, his humor, his strong work ethic, and unwavering honor. She loved the way he looked at her as though she was precious, the way he listened when she talked, as though her words mattered more than anything. She loved his hands, scarred and calloused from hard work, and the gentleness with which he touched her. She loved his voice, the way it dropped lower when he said her name, the tenderness in it when he spoke of the future. Harrison met her co-workers at the saloon and earned their approval with his respectful manner and obvious devotion to Zara. He never caused trouble, never drank too much, and treated everyone with courtesy. Zara met some of his friends from the ranch when they came to town together, and she saw how they respected Harrison, how they looked to him for leadership, even though he was not the foreman. There was something about him that inspired trust and loyalty, a natural integrity that people recognized and responded to. 2 months into their courtship, on a cool November evening, Harrison took Zara back to the Mission Gardens where he had first asked to court her. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air held the first real promise of winter cold. They walked their familiar path until they reached a bench overlooking a small fountain, and Harrison guided her to sit down. He seemed nervous, more anxious than she had ever seen him, and Zara felt her heart begin to race with anticipation. "Zara," Harrison began, taking both her hands in his, "these past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. Being with you, getting to know you, falling more in love with you every single day has shown me what life is supposed to be. You are everything I did not know I was searching for, everything I need and want." He paused, taking a deep breath, and Zara saw his hands trembling slightly. "I know I am just a ranch hand without much to offer right now. I do not have that spread of land I dream about yet, or a house to give you. But I have saved money over the years, and I have plans. I can provide for you, keep you safe and cared for. I will work every day of my life to make you happy and build the life you dream of." Zara's eyes filled with tears as she realized what was happening. Harrison released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out something wrapped in a handkerchief. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a ring. But not just any ring. It was her mother's ring, the one she had traded to the undertaker for Thomas's funeral. The simple gold band gleamed in the fading light, painfully familiar and precious beyond measure. "How did you get this?" Zara breathed, staring at the ring in shock. Harrison smiled softly, a hint of pride in his expression. I went to Mr. Simmons about a week after I met you. I had seen your hand and noticed the mark where a ring had been. And when you told me about Thomas's proper funeral, despite having no money, I put the pieces together. I asked the undertaker if a ring had been part of the payment, and he confirmed it. He was willing to sell it back to me, so I bought it. I have been carrying it ever since, waiting for the right moment. Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks as the full weight of what Harrison had done sank in. He had understood what she had sacrificed, what that ring had meant to her, and he had quietly, without fanfare or expectation of thanks, restored it to her. It was the most thoughtful, generous thing anyone had ever done for her. "Zara Vaughn," Harrison said, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you, taking care of you, and building our dreams together?" He held out the ring, his hand steady now, his eyes locked on hers with such love and hope that Zara felt her heart might burst. "Yes," she sobbed, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Harrison, yes!" He slipped the ring onto her finger, onto its rightful place, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her close, while she cried into his shoulder. These were good tears, healing tears, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming gratitude. When she finally pulled back, Harrison cupped her face and kissed her, properly this time, a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise. Zara melted into it, her arms wrapping around his neck, kissing him back with all the love and longing she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you so much, Zara." She smiled through her tears, her hand coming up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "I love you too," she whispered back. "More than I thought possible. You have given me back not just this ring, but hope, a future, everything." They sat on that bench until full dark had fallen, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans and dreaming aloud. Harrison wanted to marry as soon as possible, but he understood if Zara wanted a longer engagement. She surprised him by saying she wanted to marry soon too, having no reason to wait and every reason to begin their life together. They decided on December, giving them just over a month to make arrangements. It would be a simple wedding at the Mission Church, with Reverend Matthews officiating, but it would be theirs, a celebration of the love they had found in the midst of loss and loneliness. Harrison walked Zara back to the saloon, neither of them wanting to part. At the bottom of the stairs, he kissed her goodnight with such tenderness that she felt it all the way to her toes. "Sleep well, my love," he murmured. "Dream of our future." Zara floated up the stairs to her room, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. She spent the evening sitting by her window, looking at the ring on her finger, marveling at the turn her life had taken. Just 3 months ago she had been alone, grieving, and hopeless. Now she had Harrison, she had love, and she had a future brighter than anything she had dared imagine. The next morning, Zara went to see Mr. Simmons at the funeral parlor. She had to know how Harrison had known about the ring, had to thank the undertaker for his part in Harrison's gift. Mr. Simmons received her in his office, his kind face creasing with pleasure when he saw the ring back on her finger. "I see Mr. Reeves gave you his surprise," he said warmly. "He was most insistent about purchasing that ring back, said it was the key to your happiness." "Thank you for telling him about it," Zara said gratefully, "and thank you for everything you did for Thomas. The funeral was perfect, exactly what he deserved." Mr. Simmons waved off her thanks modestly. "Your brother was a fine young man from what you told me. It was my honor to serve him. And Miss Vaughn, if I may say so, you did the right thing trading the ring for his funeral. Some might judge you for it, but I saw the love in that sacrifice. Your mother would have approved, I am certain. Material things can be replaced. Dignity and death cannot." His words were a balm to guilt Zara had not even realized she was still carrying. She left the funeral parlor feeling lighter, more at peace with the choices she had made. That afternoon, she gave notice at the Silver Spur that she would be leaving at the end of December. Her boss, a gruff man named Pete, who had a softer heart than he liked to admit, congratulated her gruffly and said he would miss having a reliable waitress who did not cause drama. Coming from Pete, it was high praise. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by in a blur of preparation. Zara had little to arrange, having no family and few possessions, but what needed doing, she did with care. She sewed herself a new dress for the wedding, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, working on it during her free hours until her fingers were sore. Harrison arranged for them to rent a small house on the edge of town, 2 rooms and a kitchen, with a yard big enough for the chickens and garden Zara had dreamed of. It was not much, but it was theirs, a place to start building their life together. Harrison also spoke with the owner of the Triple Bar about his plans. The ranch owner, impressed with Harrison's work ethic and skill, offered him a permanent position as head wrangler with better pay and the promise of helping Harrison save toward buying his own land eventually. It was more than either of them had hoped for, a sign that their dreams were not just possible, but probable with hard work and determination. On the first Sunday in December, 3 days before the wedding, Harrison took Zara to see the little house he had rented. It was simple adobe construction, whitewashed inside and out, with wooden floors and a small fireplace for heat. The kitchen had a good stove and space for a table, and the bedroom had windows that let in morning light. The second room could be a sitting room for now, and a nursery eventually, Harrison said, with a shy smile that made Zara blush and laugh. "It is perfect," Zara breathed, walking through the empty rooms and imagining them filled with furniture and life. "Absolutely perfect." Harrison came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. "I am glad you like it," he murmured into her hair. "I want you to be happy, Zara. That is all I want." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with her heart in her eyes. "I am happy, Harrison. Happier than I ever thought I could be. You have given me everything." He kissed her softly, a gentle brush of lips that still managed to set her blood singing. "You have given me everything too," he whispered. "Purpose, hope, love. I was just drifting before I met you, moving from place to place without any real reason. Now, I have a reason for everything I do. You are my reason, Zara." They spent the afternoon in the house, planning where furniture would go, what they needed to buy, and what they could do without until they saved more money. Harrison had already purchased a bed frame and mattress, a kitchen table with 4 chairs, and a dresser for their clothes. It was basic but functional, enough to start with. Zara felt a thrill of excitement imagining making this house a home, cooking meals in that kitchen, sleeping beside Harrison in that bedroom, growing old together within these walls. The day before the wedding, Zara went to the cemetery to visit Thomas's grave one last time as a single woman. The wooden marker had been placed as promised, his name and dates carved neatly into the wood. She knelt beside the grave and told him about Harrison, about the wedding, about the new life she was beginning. "I wish you could have met him," she said softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You would have liked him, Tommy. He is good and kind and strong. He would have been the brother you never had, the family member who could protect us both. I think Mother and Father would approve. I think they would be happy for me." She placed flowers on the grave, the same wildflowers she had brought that first day, now dried and faded, but still precious. "I will always love you," she whispered. "I will never forget you. But I have to live now, Tommy. I have to move forward and build a life. I hope you understand. I hope you are at peace." The wind stirred the dry grasses around the cemetery, and Zara chose to take it as a sign of blessing, Thomas's way of telling her it was all right to be happy again. December 4th, 1882, dawned clear and cold, the Arizona winter making itself known, with frost on the ground and breath visible in the air. Zara dressed carefully in her new white dress, her hair pinned up with the blue ribbon Harrison had given her weeks ago. She looked at herself in the small mirror in her room and hardly recognized the glowing woman staring back. The gaunt, grief-stricken girl from the cemetery 2 months ago had been transformed by love into someone radiant with happiness and hope. Senora Martinez, who had become a friend, came to help Zara prepare and walk with her to the church. "You are a beautiful bride," the older woman said warmly, hugging Zara carefully so as not to muss her dress. "That young man of yours is very lucky." Zara smiled, thinking that she was the lucky one, but she accepted the compliment graciously. Together they walked to the mission church, arriving to find a small group already gathered. Harrison's friends from the Triple Bar were there, dressed in their Sunday best, and a few of Zara's co-workers from the saloon had come as well, including Pete, who looked uncomfortable in a tie, but pleased to be included. But it was Harrison who took Zara's breath away. He stood at the front of the church with Reverend Matthews, wearing new dark pants and a white shirt with a string tie, his hair neatly combed and his face shaved smooth. When Zara appeared in the doorway, his expression transformed into something that made her heart skip. Pure love shone from his eyes, wonder and joy and reverence all mixed together, and Zara felt tears prick her eyes even as she smiled. This was really happening. She was really marrying this incredible man who had restored her faith in life and love. She walked down the short aisle alone, having no father to give her away, but she did not feel alone. She felt Thomas's presence and her mother's and even her father's, all of them blessing this union, happy that she had found someone worthy of her heart. When she reached Harrison, he took her hand, his grip warm and steady, and they turned together to face Reverend Matthews. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They spoke traditional vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through all circumstances of life. When Harrison slipped a second ring onto her finger, a simple band that matched her mother's ring, Zara felt the symbolism deeply. The old and the new, past and future, grief and joy, all woven together in this moment of commitment. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife and told Harrison he could kiss his bride, Harrison did so with a gentleness that made several people in the congregation sigh audibly. It was a kiss of promise, of beginning, of forever. The small gathering moved to Senora Martinez's restaurant for a wedding dinner, the kind woman having insisted on providing the meal as her gift to the couple. The food was abundant and delicious, the conversation warm and full of laughter, and Zara felt surrounded by love despite having no blood family present. These people, friends and acquaintances who had gathered to celebrate with them, were the beginning of a new family, a community they were building together. As the sun set and the party wound down, Harrison and Zara said their goodbyes and walked hand in hand to their new home. Harrison had started a fire in the fireplace earlier, and the house was warm and welcoming. He lifted Zara over the threshold with a flourish that made her laugh, then set her down gently in the middle of their sitting room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reeves," he said softly, and Zara felt the rightness of those words settle into her bones. She was home, truly home, for the first time since her mother died. Not just a place to sleep, but a real home with someone who loved her and chose her every single day. That night, in their marriage bed with Harrison's arms around her, Zara felt the last pieces of her broken heart click back into place. She had been shattered by loss, ground down by grief and loneliness, but Harrison had gathered up the pieces and carefully, tenderly helped her put herself back together. Not the same as before, but something new and stronger, forged in the fire of pain and quenched in the cool water of love. "What are you thinking?" Harrison murmured in the darkness, his breath warm against her hair. Zara snuggled closer, savoring his warmth and the solid strength of him. "I am thinking about that day in the cemetery," she admitted, "about how broken I was, how hopeless everything seemed. And I am thinking about how you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not know I was praying. You saved me, Harrison." She felt him shake his head against her hair. "You saved yourself, Zara. I just had the privilege of being there to help. You are the strongest woman I have ever met. Do you know what moved me most when I learned about you trading your mother's ring for Thomas's funeral?" Zara turned in his arms so she could see his face in the dim firelight filtering in from the other room. "What?" she asked softly. Harrison's eyes were suspiciously bright as he looked at her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "That you understood what mattered," he said quietly. "That you knew dignity and respect for your brother's body and memory were worth more than any object, even one precious to you. That you were willing to make a real sacrifice, to give up something you treasured, to do right by someone you loved. It showed me who you are at your core, Zara. Selfless, loving, strong. I fell in love with you that moment, even before I knew your name. And I knew I had to get that ring back for you, had to restore what you had given up, because you deserved to have both, the ring and the knowledge that you did right by your brother." Zara was crying now, overwhelmed by his words and the depth of understanding they revealed. "I love you so much," she whispered. "I did not think it was possible to love someone this much." Harrison kissed away her tears, his lips gentle on her cheeks. "I love you too," he murmured. "Forever, Zara, through everything. I promise you." They made love then, tender and sweet, a physical sealing of the vows they had spoken earlier, Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms with sleep pulling them under, Zara felt a peace she had not known in years settle over her. She was loved, she was safe, she was home. The first months of their marriage were an adjustment as they learned to live together, to navigate each other's habits and preferences, but they were happy months. Harrison rode out to the Triple Bar each morning before dawn and returned each evening at sunset, tired but content. Zara spent her days transforming their house into a home, sewing curtains, planting a winter garden, and beginning to acquire the chickens she had dreamed of. She cooked meals for her husband, darned his clothes, and discovered a gift for making their small income stretch further than either would have thought possible. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked, sharing their days, making plans, and slowly revealing more of themselves to each other. Harrison told her about his childhood in Kansas, about his father, who had been a hard man but fair, about his mother, who had been gentle and died too young. He spoke of his wandering years after his parents' deaths, drifting from ranch to ranch, never feeling settled or purposeful until he met Zara. She told him more about her own family, about happy memories before the losses began, about her mother's wisdom and her father's laughter, and Thomas's dreams of becoming a teacher someday. They attended church together each Sunday, and Zara began to make friends among the women there, forming connections that helped her feel less isolated. She was no longer just a waitress at a saloon, someone on the fringes of respectable society. She was a married woman, a ranch hand's wife, and that brought a respectability and acceptance she had not enjoyed before. It should not have mattered, but it did, and Zara was grateful for the difference. In March, Zara realized she was pregnant. The signs had been there for a few weeks, but she had not wanted to hope too soon, afraid of disappointment. But when she went to see the doctor and he confirmed her suspicions, she felt joy bubble up inside her like a spring. She was going to have a baby, Harrison's baby, and the family she had dreamed of rebuilding was beginning to form. She told Harrison that evening when he came home, unable to contain the news for even an hour longer. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He let out a whoop of joy that probably carried to the neighbors, then swept her into his arms and spun her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly, setting her down gently and placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." His eyes were bright with tears, and Zara loved him even more in that moment for not being ashamed of his emotion. "Are you happy?" she asked unnecessarily, seeing the answer written all over his face. Harrison laughed. "Happy does not begin to cover it, Zara. I am ecstatic, thrilled, terrified, all of it." He cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with such love that she felt her own tears start. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed, a home, a purpose, and now a child. I cannot imagine being more blessed." They celebrated that night with a quiet dinner and much discussion of names, of where the baby would sleep, of all the changes a child would bring. Harrison was already planning additions to the house, a proper nursery, and eventually more bedrooms for the siblings he hoped this baby would have. Zara listened to his enthusiastic planning and felt her heart swell with contentment. This was her life now. This was her future, and it was more beautiful than anything she had imagined. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Zara bloomed with health and happiness. Harrison was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried that she was doing too much or not resting enough. Zara found his concern touching even when it bordered on annoying, understanding that it came from love and the fear of losing what he had found. As her belly grew and the baby's movements became visible, Harrison would spend evenings with his hand on her stomach, talking to their child, and singing soft songs from his own childhood. In November, when Zara was 8 months pregnant, Harrison was offered an opportunity that would change their lives. The foreman of the Triple Bar was retiring, and the ranch owner offered the position to Harrison. It came with a substantial increase in pay and a small house on ranch property. But more than that, the owner told Harrison that if he proved himself in the foreman position, he would consider selling Harrison a parcel of land on the edge of the ranch property at a fair price in a few years. It was the opportunity they had been hoping for, a chance to achieve Harrison's dream of owning land far sooner than they had expected. Harrison and Zara talked it over carefully. The house on ranch property would be more isolated than their current home in town, and Zara would be further from the doctor and neighbors when the baby came. But it was a better house, larger and sturdier, and the opportunity was too good to pass up. They decided Harrison would accept the position and they would move in the spring after the baby was born and Zara had recovered from childbirth. In December, exactly 1 year after their wedding, Zara went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth, and there were hours when Harrison paced outside the bedroom where Senora Martinez and the doctor attended Zara, praying harder than he had ever prayed that both his wife and child would survive. When he finally heard a baby's cry, thin and strong, followed shortly by the doctor calling him in, Harrison's knees nearly buckled with relief. Zara lay exhausted on their bed, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale, but she was smiling as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "We have a son," she said softly, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. "Harrison, we have a son." Harrison approached slowly, almost afraid to believe it was real, and looked down at the baby in Zara's arms. His son, so tiny and perfect, with a cap of dark hair and a red wrinkled face that was somehow the most beautiful thing Harrison had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" Harrison asked, and Zara carefully transferred the baby into his father's arms. Harrison cradled his son awkwardly, terrified of dropping him or holding him wrong, but the baby settled against his chest as though he belonged there. "Hello, little one," Harrison whispered. "I am your papa. I have been waiting to meet you." The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but seemingly trying to see the source of the voice, and Harrison felt his heart crack wide open with a love so fierce it was almost painful. They named him Thomas Harrison Reeves, honoring Zara's brother and giving him Harrison's name as well. Little Tommy, as they called him, was a good baby, healthy and strong despite his small size. He ate well and slept in reasonable stretches, and both parents fell completely in love with him in the way new parents always do, convinced their child was extraordinary in every way. In April, when Tommy was 4 months old and spring had arrived in full force, they made the move to the foreman's house on the Triple Bar property. It was indeed nicer than their house in town, with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a spacious sitting room. There was a barn for animals and a large yard that Zara immediately began planning to fill with an expanded garden. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and town was a 6-mile ride, but they had each other, and that was what mattered. Harrison threw himself into his new role as foreman, proving the ranch owner's faith in him was well placed. He managed the crew of cowboys with a combination of firmness and fairness that earned their respect and loyalty. He worked harder than ever, often riding out before dawn and not returning until after dark, but he never neglected his family. No matter how tired he was, he always made time to hold Tommy, to talk with Zara about her day, to make her feel valued and loved. Zara created a warm, welcoming home in the ranch house, making it a place where Harrison could rest and recover from his long days. She kept an immaculate house, cooked hearty meals, and raised Tommy with a combination of love and practical sense that helped the baby thrive. She also befriended the wives of other ranch hands, forming a small community of women who supported each other through the challenges of ranch life. 2 years passed in a blur of work and family, of small joys and everyday challenges. Tommy grew from a baby into a toddler, walking and then running, chattering in incomplete sentences that his parents somehow understood. In the spring of 1885, Zara gave birth to a second child, a daughter they named Grace Maria Reeves. Grace was smaller than Tommy had been, more delicate, but she had her mother's dark eyes and her father's determined chin. Harrison was even more smitten with his daughter than he had been with his son, holding her for hours and declaring her to be the most beautiful baby ever born. Zara laughed at his bias, but secretly agreed. Their family was growing, becoming the dream they had both cherished, and every day Zara thanked God for Harrison, for their children, for the life they had built together from the ashes of grief and loneliness. In the fall of that year, the ranch owner called Harrison to his office for a meeting. The older man was in his 60s now, and increasingly ready to step back from daily management. He had been impressed with how Harrison had run the operation, how the ranch had prospered under his leadership, and he wanted to make good on his earlier promise. He offered to sell Harrison 200 acres on the eastern edge of the ranch, good land with water access and grazing for cattle or horses, at a price that was fair but still substantial. Harrison came home that evening with his mind whirling with possibilities and concerns. He and Zara sat up late into the night, going over their finances, calculating what they could afford and what risks they would have to take. They had saved steadily over the 3 years of Harrison's higher pay, but buying land would take most of their savings and require them to borrow additional funds. It was frightening to take on debt, but it was also the opportunity they had been working toward. "What do you think?" Harrison asked Zara finally, trusting her judgment. "It is a risk, but it could set us up for life. Our children would have land, a legacy to inherit. But if we fail, if something goes wrong, we could lose everything." Zara reached across the table and took his hand, her expression serious but determined. "I think we take the risk," she said firmly. "We have survived harder things than debt, Harrison. We have both lost everything before and rebuilt our lives from nothing. If we fail, we will survive and start over. But if we do not try, we will always wonder what might have been. I believe in us. I believe in you. Let us build that ranch you have been dreaming about." Harrison squeezed her hand gratefully, relieved to have her support. The next day, he told the ranch owner they would take the land. They spent weeks working out the details, arranging a loan from the bank in town, and planning what they would do with the property. Harrison would continue working as foreman while building up their own herd and resources, essentially working 2 jobs until they were established enough for him to leave the Triple Bar and focus solely on their own ranch. It was exhausting, backbreaking work. Harrison was gone even more than before, spending every spare moment on their land, building fences, constructing a barn, and beginning to acquire cattle. Zara supported him by managing everything at home, taking care of the children and the household with minimal help, and never complaining about his long absences. She knew this was their future they were building, and she was willing to make the sacrifices necessary to achieve it. 5 years passed in this manner, years of hard work and slow progress. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere when Harrison was home, learning ranch skills almost before he could read. Grace became a sweet, thoughtful child who helped her mother in the garden and with her younger siblings. Yes, siblings. Zara had 2 more children in those 5 years, another son named Peter in 1887, and a daughter named Lucy in 1889. Their family was large and loud and full of love, and the house that had once seemed spacious now felt comfortably full. In the spring of 1890, 8 years after their wedding, Harrison and Zara finally moved onto their own land permanently. They left the foreman's house and the Triple Bar behind, though Harrison maintained a good relationship with the ranch owner who had given him his start. The house Harrison had built on their property was modest but sturdy, designed with room to expand as they could afford it. It had 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen where the family gathered, and a wide porch where they sat in the evenings, watching the sunset over land that was truly theirs. The first year on their own ranch was challenging, testing every bit of strength and determination they possessed. There were problems with disease in the cattle, a drought that stretched their water resources, and the constant struggle to make ends meet while paying off their debt. But they persevered, supporting each other through the difficulties, and slowly they began to see success. The cattle herd grew, the land recovered from the drought with careful management, and their reputation for quality livestock spread through the territory. By 1895, 13 years after that first meeting in the Tucson cemetery, Harrison and Zara had built something remarkable. Their ranch was thriving, employing several hands and running 500 head of cattle. They had paid off their debt to the bank 2 years early through careful management and hard work. Their children were healthy and happy, learning the values of hard work, integrity, and family from parents who exemplified those qualities daily. On a warm September evening, Zara stood on the porch of their home watching Harrison teach Tommy, now 12 years old, how to rope a post. Grace, who was 10, was helping Lucy, now 6, feed the chickens while Peter, 8 years old, chased their dog around the yard. Zara's hand rested on her stomach, where a 5th child was beginning to make its presence known. She had not told Harrison yet, wanting to be absolutely sure before getting his hopes up, but she was nearly certain she was pregnant again. Harrison finished with Tommy and walked toward the house, his stride as confident and purposeful as ever, despite the years and hard work that had lined his face and put silver in his dark hair. When he saw Zara standing on the porch, his face lit up with the same warm smile that had captivated her 13 years ago in a cemetery when she had been broken and hopeless. He climbed the steps and pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly, despite the children's groans of mock disgust. "What are you thinking about, wife?" Harrison murmured against her hair, holding her close. Zara leaned into his solid strength, marveling as she always did at how blessed she was to have this man as her partner in life. "I was thinking about the day we met," she admitted, "about how lost I was, how certain I was that my life was over. And I was thinking about how wrong I was. My life was just beginning, but I could not see it yet." She pulled back to look up at him, her hand coming up to touch his weathered face. "You gave me everything, Harrison. Not just this ranch or these children or financial security. You gave me back my ability to hope, to dream, to believe in good things. You restored more than my mother's ring that day you proposed. You restored me." Harrison's eyes were suspiciously bright as he looked down at her. "You did the same for me, Zara. I was drifting, empty, going through the motions of living without any real purpose. You gave me a reason to build instead of just exist. You gave me a family, a home, a future worth fighting for." He kissed her again, tender and sweet. "I love you more now than I did the day I married you, and I did not think that was possible." "I love you too," Zara whispered. "And Harrison, I have something to tell you." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach, watching his face as understanding dawned. His expression transformed into pure joy, the same joy he had shown with each of their children, never diminishing, always new and wonderful. "Another baby?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Zara nodded, smiling through happy tears. "Another baby, due in the spring, I think." Harrison whooped with delight, picking her up and spinning her around, just as he had done all those years ago when she told him about Tommy. Their children came running, wanting to know what had their father so excited, and when Harrison told them there would be a new brother or sister, they cheered and jumped around with questions and excitement. That evening, after the children were finally settled in bed and the house was quiet, Harrison and Zara sat together on their porch in the rocking chairs he had built. The stars spread out overhead in a brilliant display, unmarred by city lights, and the night air was cool and pleasant. Harrison held Zara's hand, his thumb tracing the 2 rings she wore, her mother's simple band and the matching ring he had given her on their wedding day. "Do you ever regret it?" Harrison asked quietly. "Trading that ring for Thomas's funeral. I know it was your mother's, and I know how much it meant to you." Zara considered the question carefully before answering, wanting to give him truth rather than what he might want to hear. "I regretted losing it," she said finally. "But I never regretted the trade itself. Thomas deserved that proper funeral, and I would make the same choice again. What I regret is that I had to make that choice at all, that I was in a position where I had to sacrifice something precious to provide basic dignity for my brother." She squeezed Harrison's hand. "But even that regret has faded, because if things had been different, I might never have met you. You might not have been in that cemetery that day. You might not have learned about the ring and understood what it represented. Our whole life together grew from that moment of sacrifice and loss. How can I regret something that led to all of this?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. "You are remarkable. Do you know that?" he said finally. "Your ability to see purpose in pain, to find meaning in suffering, to build something beautiful from brokenness. You inspire me every single day." "Zara," she leaned her head on his shoulder, contentment settling over her like a warm blanket. "We inspire each other," she corrected gently. "That is what makes us work, Harrison. We are partners in every sense of the word, building together, dreaming together, surviving together, and thriving together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, rocking gently, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. The new baby, another son they named James, arrived in April of 1896, healthy and strong. With 5 children now, the house was constantly full of noise and activity, but it was a happy chaos that both Harrison and Zara thrived in. They were older now, no longer the young couple who had married in haste and hope, but partners who had weathered storms together and come out stronger. The lines on their faces were earned through laughter and worry, hard work and long days, but also through profound joy and satisfaction. As the years continued to pass, their ranch grew and prospered. Tommy proved to have a natural talent for working with horses, and began breaking and training them to sell, adding another income stream to the ranch. Grace married a young man from a neighboring ranch when she was 19, giving Harrison and Zara their first grandchild 2 years later. Peter showed interest in the business side of ranching, keeping meticulous records and managing accounts with a skill that impressed his parents. Lucy was the family's artistic soul, drawing and painting the landscape and animals around her with remarkable talent. James, the youngest, was still finding his path, but he had his father's steady temperament and his mother's kind heart. In 1905, 23 years after their wedding, Harrison and Zara celebrated their anniversary with a large gathering at the ranch. All their children were there, along with Grace's husband and 2 children, friends from neighboring ranches, and even some of the original crew from the Triple Bar, who had worked under Harrison's leadership years ago. Senora Martinez, now quite elderly but still sharp as a tack, attended and gave a tearful toast to the couple she had watched fall in love over enchiladas all those years ago. As Harrison looked around at the gathering, at the life he and Zara had built together, he felt overwhelming gratitude. They had started with nothing but love and determination. 2 orphaned, grieving people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. They had survived hard times and celebrated good times, raised children and built a legacy. And through it all, they had grown deeper in love rather than apart. That night, after the guests had left and the house was finally quiet, Harrison and Zara took a walk under the stars, something they still did regularly despite their age and responsibilities. Harrison's hair was mostly silver now, and Zara had laugh lines around her eyes and mouth, but to each other, they were still as beautiful as they had been at 23 and 27. "Do you remember what you said to me the night I proposed?" Harrison asked, his arm around Zara's waist as they walked. "About me giving you back hope?" Zara nodded, remembering that moment clearly, despite the passage of time. "I remember everything about that night," she said softly. "I want you to know that you gave me the same gift," Harrison said seriously, stopping to face her. "Before I met you, I was just existing. After my parents died, after I lost my family, I moved from place to place working and saving money, but never really building anything or connecting with anyone. I was protecting myself from more loss by not allowing myself to love or hope for anything permanent. You changed that, Zara. You showed me that the risk of loving was worth the potential for pain because the joy of having someone to love, to build a life with, outweighed any fear." Zara felt tears slip down her cheeks, touched by his words even after all these years together. "We saved each other," she said firmly. "Neither of us could have built this life alone, Harrison. We needed each other, and we found each other exactly when we were supposed to. I believe that with all my heart. God or fate or simple chance brought us together in that cemetery, and everything good in my life has flowed from that meeting." Harrison pulled her close, holding her against his heart. "I love you, Zara Reeves, more than words can express, more than actions can show, though I will spend the rest of my days trying." She wrapped her arms around him, feeling safe and cherished and profoundly blessed. "I love you too, Harrison. Always and forever." They stood there under the vast Arizona sky, on land they owned, surrounded by the evidence of their hard work and love, and knew they had achieved something rare and precious. They had built not just a ranch or a family, but a true partnership grounded in mutual respect, shared values, and a love that had been tested by time and found to be unshakable. Years continued to unfold in the pattern they had established. Seasons changed, children grew, and left to make their own lives. Grandchildren arrived and filled the house with young energy once more. Harrison and Zara grew older, their bodies slower, but their love as strong as ever. They faced losses over the years, friends passing away, the death of Senora Martinez, which grieved them both deeply, harder winters and drought years that tested their ranch's resources. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other, and they always prevailed. In the spring of 1912, 30 years after their wedding, Harrison became ill with pneumonia. It came on suddenly, and despite the best care Zara could provide and the doctor's frequent visits, it became clear Harrison was not recovering. He lay in their bed, the same bed where they had shared 30 years of marriage, and held Zara's hand as his breathing grew more labored. "Do not be afraid," Zara whispered, though her own heart was breaking. "I am here with you. I have always been here." Harrison managed a weak smile, his eyes still holding that warmth that had captured her heart 3 decades earlier. "Best 30 years of my life," he managed to say between difficult breaths. "No regrets, Zara. Only gratitude." His hand tightened on hers. "Saved me. That day, cemetery. Gave me everything. Zara was crying openly now, pressing kisses to his weathered hand. "You gave me everything, too," she sobbed. "You gave me life, Harrison. Real life, not just existence. You gave me love and family and home. You gave me every good thing I have known." Harrison's breathing was growing shallower, and Zara knew he had only moments left. She climbed into bed beside him, cradling his head against her chest, wanting him to hear her heartbeat as he had for so many years. "I love you," she whispered fiercely. "I will love you forever, Harrison Reeves. Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for every single day we had together." She felt him relax in her arms, felt his breathing stop, and knew he was gone. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to drown her, but even through it she felt gratitude. She had been blessed with 30 years of the truest love she could have imagined, 30 years of partnership and joy and shared purpose. Many people never knew such love at all. She had been fortunate beyond measure, but unlike the death of her brother Thomas all those years ago, Harrison's death did not leave Zara alone and hopeless. She was surrounded by their 5 children, now adults with families of their own, and by grandchildren who had adored their grandfather. The ranch they had built together continued to thrive under Tommy's management, ensuring financial security for the family. Zara lived another 15 years after Harrison's death, staying in the house they had built, surrounded by memories and love. She never remarried, never even considered it. Harrison had been her heart, her partner, her great love, and there could be no replacing him. Instead, she poured her love into her growing family, into the grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren who filled her days with purpose. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had found a grieving woman in a cemetery and given her back her mother's ring along with his whole heart. She told them about hard work and sacrifice, about facing loss and choosing to hope anyway, about building something meaningful from nothing but determination and love. When Zara finally passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1927 at the age of 68, she was buried beside Harrison on a hill overlooking their ranch. The entire community attended her funeral, a testament to the respect and love she had earned over a lifetime of kindness and integrity. Her children and grandchildren gathered around the graves, sharing memories and tears, honoring a woman who had survived tremendous loss to build an extraordinary life. On Zara's headstone, beneath her name and dates, her children had inscribed a simple line that captured the essence of her story. She traded a ring for dignity and found love beyond measure. It was a fitting epitaph for a woman who had understood that sacrifice made with love was never truly a loss, that sometimes what we give away returns to us transformed and multiplied beyond imagination. The ranch passed down through generations of Reeves family members, each adding their own contributions while honoring the foundation Harrison and Zara had built. The story of how their great-great-grandparents met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can find us, that love can bloom in cemeteries and thrive in deserts, that 2 broken people can become whole together, building something beautiful and lasting from the ruins of grief. The 2 rings Zara had worn, her mother's simple band and Harrison's matching one, were preserved by the family as precious heirlooms. They represented more than just metal and memories. They represented sacrifice and redemption, loss and restoration, the kind of love that transforms lives and echoes through generations. They represented a cowboy who had been moved beyond words by a woman's courage and devotion, and who had dedicated his life to proving himself worthy of her heart. In the end, what Harrison and Zara had built together was more than land or livestock, more than children or financial success. They had built a partnership grounded in mutual respect and deep love, a foundation strong enough to support not just their own lives, but the lives of generations who came after them. They had proven that even in the harsh realities of the Wild West, even when death and loss seemed to have the final word, love could triumph. Not by denying pain or pretending grief did not matter, but by facing it honestly and choosing to hope, to try, to build again. Their love story became the foundation their descendants built their own lives upon, a reminder that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought or taken away. Integrity, courage, sacrifice, and love. These were the true inheritance Harrison and Zara left behind, worth more than all the land and cattle their ranch represented. And it all began on a hot September day in 1882 in a Tucson cemetery when a cowboy offered water to a grieving woman and saw not just her loss, but her extraordinary strength and capacity for love.